Hello, everybody. This is Grandma Carla with Great Lit Readings, and I'm going to read the second chapter of Abby Lost at Sea. Now, yesterday I told you I was going to show you the pictures. Well, after I started reading, I realized there weren't any pictures. So we're just going to have to use our imagination. If there ever does happen to be a picture, I'll be sure to show it to you. Trying to get the light right. Okay. Did you ever hear about the tortoise who swallowed some gunpowder? Luke asked Abby, Sarah, and Jacob on the walk home from school. Sarah, in a red calico dress and white pinafore, looked up eagerly at Luke. No, what happened? Well, he shot right past the hare, won the race, and was the guest of honor at the victory dinner. Luke paused to glance at Abby, where they served grilled tortoise steaks. Sarah and Jacob giggled. Abby cocked an eyebrow. Even so, I'm sure that Turtle appreciated winning for once in her life. And as for the dinner, that rabbit deserved it. Sarah looked confused, then shrugged and skipped ahead of them on the dirt road. Luke glanced over at Abby. Are you going to read that letter? She gripped the leather strap that held the slate and sketchbook. I'm dying to, but this one is addressed to Pa. Nettles and rats, Luke said. I guess I'll have to wait till tomorrow to hear your uncle's news. Turning to Jacob, he asked, are the fish still biting at Coyote Creek? Abby soon lost interest in their conversation. When she spotted a flash of blue on a nearby birch tree, she quickly unbuckled her book strap, flipped open her tattered sketchbook, and grabbed the pencil from her pinafore pocket. Her eyes narrowed as she focused on the blue jay before her, capturing its likeness in quick strokes. The jay cocked its head sideways as if to say, "Did you get my best profile?" By now, Sarah stood waiting far ahead of the others. She looked back and frowned. Her white blonde hair coming loose from its single braid, her eyes snapping with irritation. Abby, come on, she hollered from the bend in the road that led to their 3-room cabin. Ma's probably got hot cookies waiting. I like hot cookies. Abby returned to her drawing, too busy to mind Sarah. But a sudden whack on her back jolted the pencil, sending a crooked line across the paper. Luke, she growled, turning her wide-set eyes on him. The blue jay cawed loudly and flew off, a brilliant splash of larkspur against the now gray sky. Luke grinned down at her, the dimple in his left cheek puckering. Green eyes sparkled with mischief. Ah, Abby, why do you need to draw it when we've got millions of them everywhere? He said, glancing around the countryside. His finger tweaked her slightly upturned nose. Abby's mouth drew into a straight line. Haven't you ever heard of art, culture, civilized enjoyment? Who wants to sit around drawing, he asked, or writing poems, when there's a whole world out there waiting to be explored? He was forever growing impatient with her stopping to draw or write down a poem. Once he had accused her of carrying quotes in her memory like most people carry peppermints in their pockets. For your information, a lot of people love art and pay good money for books of it. Abby closed her sketchbook, tightened the strap, and jammed the pencil behind her ear. She sighed as she started down the road. How do you think Mr. Joseph Banks, the botanist, who traveled with Captain Cook on his sailing adventures, made all of his money? Art? Luke questioned, his nut-brown eyebrow arched. Abby nodded. He's famous for recording all of the beautiful flora and fauna in the South Pacific. Luke frowned. What do floors and fawns have to do with art? Abby shook her head. Flora and fauna. It means the plant and animal life of all the islands he visited. Luke, you frustrate the freckles off of me. He ignored her comment. So he made money off his traveling adventures? That's one smart dandy, Luke said, as he stuck a blade of grass between his lips. He brushed his straight hair off his forehead. Keep it up then, Ab. Maybe someday you can make us some money. That'll help when we set off on adventures. Abby grinned in spite of herself. She and Luke had been dreaming of travel since they'd first met 3 years ago, when he'd come west from Pennsylvania alone. For the past 3 harvests, Luke had worked alongside Pa and had become a welcome addition to their family, sort of the son that Pa had never had, even though he lived with his rich aunt Dagmar Gronin. Maybe we'll follow in Mr. Banks' footsteps, Luke continued, looking up at the tree limbs moving in a gust of wind. We could make our first stop your uncle's ranch in the Sandwich Islands. Abby bit her lip. They had pored over every letter Uncle Sam had written and memorized the map of the islands he'd drawn. Maybe I can't wait to read his latest letter. Luke did a handstand and walked forward on his hands, legs straight up in the air. Let me know what's new, he said, flipping to a standing position. See you later, he waved, and took the left fork in the road. For a minute, Abby watched his back. Then she called out, Can the hare join the tortoise for a victory supper tonight? Luke turned. Got too many chores. Maybe mañana, he said, using the Spanish word for tomorrow. The Mexicans still ruled California, and the newly arriving Americans had adopted some of their Spanish words. Abby waved at him. It's probably for the best. We're having rabbit stew. Luke's mouth dropped open. Then he shook his head with a smile and headed down the lane that led to his aunt's mansion. Abby looked up. Gray clouds had already moved in to cover the pine-green Santa Cruz Mountains off in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of rain. Turning toward home, she saw pint-sized Sarah standing in a wide-legged stance with her hands on her hips. You're so slow, Sarah accused before she raced ahead, reaching their small cabin at the end of the lane first. Not today, Abby yelled back, remembering her sweet victory. She watched her nimble sister climb the old apricot tree beside the cottage. At their yard, Abby balanced her school books on the fence post, then took hold of the water pump handle. The metal was cold to the touch. After 3 pumps, the silver liquid gushed out in the stream that hit the rocks below. Droplets spattered her dusty high-button shoes as she leaned over, took a long drink, and then cooled her flushed face. She dried her cheeks on the sleeve of her cream cotton blouse. Come on, she called over her shoulder as she picked up her books. But Sarah paid her no mind as she swung upside down from the limb, skirt over her face, pantaloons bared to the world. Abby climbed the porch steps and opened the cotton door. Ma, she called, we got a letter from Uncle Samuel today. Charlotte Kendall looked up from her work of cutting potatoes at the kitchen table. Really? She asked, her soft brown eyes full of wonder. Who delivered it? Then Sarah hurled through the front door. A pirate, Ma. He was big and ugly with a wooden leg, and he smelled something fierce, too. Ma's eyes reflected surprise, but Abby agreed with Sarah's description. It's true, Ma. She laid her books on the table and retrieved the letter, handing it over. Her mother wiped her hands on her apron and carefully slit open the envelope with her paring knife. She silently scanned the letter, ignoring Sarah's pleas that she read it aloud. Then Abby watched in surprise as her mother untied her apron and patted her bun neatly. Picking up the letter, Ma calmly put it back in the envelope. Abby, see to the potatoes and the sweeping. I'm going to find your father. Abby's eyes widened. Her mother never went looking for her father 2 hours before he was due home. Abby watched her mother disappear out the door, then went in search of the broom. If there was one thing Abby hated in life, it was sweeping. But at the moment, she didn't feel like complaining. She could hear Sarah whining that Mom had left without giving her a snack to eat. But Abby didn't respond. Something else was speaking louder. It was that little voice of warning that had begun when she heard the first kerthunk on the schoolhouse steps. Now that feeling of premonition was stronger than ever. What was in the letter that would cause Ma to go find Pa? Abby had a feeling she wasn't going to like the answer. We'll read more about Abby lost at sea tomorrow.